Hi everyone, Tony Tonkin here. In this video, we are going to interview a woman who has had an addiction for many, many years. We're going to have a discussion with her about where that addiction came from, the circumstances which brought her to needing to take drugs, to how she's endeavoured to work through that problem and how she's been able to manage it since she's recognised it as a significant problem, one that was impacting her whole life. There are many people out there in our community who suffer from a form of addiction. They often don't know what to do about it. They often feel discouraged because they keep revisiting the problem over and over again. This conversation we're going to have today with Shanice is going to help people to better understand how to manage the addiction, how to think about the addiction, what are the triggers, and how they're going to move through resolving the problems which sit around addictive behaviours. I hope you enjoy this video. So we'll just start with just some history, if you wouldn't mind, about where you come from, how you became involved in drugs in the first instance.
Yep. Well, it's a bit of a bizarre story because I was a young mum. I had my son at 15 and my daughter at 16 or 17. But I started smoking weed in school, and that was it was happening in school. So I started smoking weed in school. But I stopped as soon as I found out I was pregnant with my eldest, who's 19. Because obviously I didn't want to do weed while I was pregnant. But I never was educated on drugs. I always saw movies and I thought all drugs were the same. Like I thought they were all as bad as heroin or it was all injecting. I actually didn't know how severe drugs was because I wasn't educated. I was just a young mum. And it wasn't until I moved to Adelaide and I had no family support with two young kids. So I went on Lava Life and met some guys, and they were the only people I knew because I couldn't obviously go out and meet people because I had two young kids, when I was 18. And then I can't remember how it all started, but all I know is I got engaged to a guy down here in Adelaide, and I think he paid for a hotel room, and first time I had the kids babysat, and
how old were you at that time?
18.
18.
Just turned 18, and so he was doing pills and I think meth in the hotel room. So because I didn't have the kids in my care, I thought I'll do it as a once off, and then we got together and we got engaged, and I banned drugs in my house, and I never touched it again. It was just an experience, try while I didn't have the kids with me. But then he passed away at my home. He committed suicide with Shani and AJ at home, and I had no support. So I was left with two kids at 18 and just witnessed a horrific event. And because I didn't know anyone in Adelaide, one of the people that I did know, them guys that I met at Lava Life, one of them was doing meth. And I just started with licking the bag. And that's how I started, because I didn't know too much about drugs. I would just lick the bag, and it seemed to numb the grief or get me through the grief. I had no idea about addiction, and then I had the.
You heard about the grief of the loss of the suicide.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the grief and the loss of the suicide. It was trauma because I was the one that found him, and I had to cut him down. So it was very horrific, and I was and I had no education. I had no family around me to monitor me through the grief or get me through the grief. All I had was these couple of people I knew, and one just happened to be on meth. And I licked the bag, and all I knew was that it made me feel better. I had no idea about addiction, no idea about drugs, like no idea. And
could you describe to us what it felt like, the relief or whatever it may have been that you got from the drugs at that time?
I think it just blocked everything I was feeling out. Because I was a mess after his death. I was traumatized. I was in grief. I just was, and it just blocked that out and allowed me to, I thought at the time, deal with it or get through it. and then I lost my kids, to DCP for the first time. And that broke me when I lost my kids to DCP. Still not knowing about drugs too much, but I did tell DCP that I was licking the bag of, you know, methamphetamines, and that year I got my kids back, you know, but while I was abusing drugs, because that year still had no real strong knowledge of drugs. All I knew was that I couldn't deal with the loss of my kids. So I took everything. I took trips, I took pills, I took gear, I took whatever I could get into my body, and I would somehow function to all these appointments and maintain that I wasn't on drugs through that whole period, being on drugs. But when I got my kids returned, I didn't believe in drugs around kids, and I didn't realise about addiction, and an addiction had occurred. Like I thought as soon as I get home, I'll never need drugs again. Like it will be, they're my happiness and I'll be wrapped. But instead I got hit with tiredness, and that was a shock. That was a major shock. And then I rang up DCP 24 hours after they returned them and said, I need help, you know, like after being honest with them through the whole year, getting the kids back within 24 hours, I realised that I couldn't supervise my two kids that had just come home because I was now sleeping. I had no idea that this was as a result of drugs. And yeah, so then they came, instead of helping me, they came and removed the kids again. And then I had a massive overdose. This is one of the first times I ever quit drugs. And I've never...
So what time, can you talk about what time span here, Shanice, we're talking about between
this
18 now and...
Probably about 20, 18.
Right. So it's 2 years later since your first experience drugs?
Yeah. Or maybe it might have been 18. Yeah, probably 18, borderline 20, because it might have been, you know, a year that they, you know, because they were removed for the year, I got them back, and then they were removed again. And then I had then I had a massive overdose. Like, I just couldn't believe what had happened. That was my first ever major suicide attempt, and it nearly killed me. I overdosed on Tremel and everything, and it was really bizarre how I woke up in hospital, because I woke up, what I thought was a week later, and I thought I nearly died, because I had, you know, it was Tramadol, heroin, everything. I had a massive overdose, and for some reason my brain snapped, and I forgot that I was on drugs, and that's how I first ever got clean, is I actually forgot I was abusing drugs.
So can you explain what happened between licking the bags and that introduction to becoming involved in heavier drugs?
Because I was just like, because I started meeting more people and doing the wrong thing when my kids weren't with me and they were in DCP. My life was self-destruction. I would put myself in really dangerous situations. I was 18 and, you know, going on 19, and I would meet random people. I wouldn't be at my house because that's where my partner died. So I had no family contact with my family, and I would meet all these spontaneous people, whether it would be clubbing or whatever, and I would just get in people's car and end up wherever. It was bad, and I would take whatever. So that's what that year looked like before I got my kids back. And then when I got them back, like a year after, so I would have been probably in my 19, that's when I realised that I had, that something was wrong, because I was now coming down off drugs, and I didn't know about addiction. And it's so funny now, because now I know, and I'm educating my other kids on addiction. You know, like I say to them, addiction you don't just wake up and become an addict. You know, it comes on slowly, whether it be partying on the weekends or, you know, eventually things start to slip. You start not going to work, or you start doing it more frequently. And this is how it started. You know, I would slowly start licking the bag. As soon as I dealt with another trauma, I met people that were doing all sorts of drugs, and I was just taking whatever. And it was the meth that I had the real problem with, because that's obviously why I was tired. Because you take this horrible drug to deal with things, and you do get addicted. Your body and your mind relies on it for energy, and that's where, you know, even if you got the most important thing is right in front of you, that's not going to give you the energy back when you're coming down off of it. It's really horrible. So anyway, I had an overdose, and with that one was a real weird quitting attempt. Well, I did quit for 2.5 years because I woke up, like I said, I've never been able to comprehend what happened to my brain, because obviously I did have seizures and stuff with the overdose, but I actually woke up from someone who would dress up like a model. I woke up, I didn't know how to dress, didn't know how to apply makeup, forgot that I actually did drugs. And I just put it down to the reason why I felt so crap is because of how many seizures I had. And I got clean for 2.5 years. Obviously, because I didn't do the hard yards and actually registering or knowing that that's why I was, like it was drugs that was why I felt crap, I put it down to the suicide attempt. I obviously relapsed 2.5 years later. I got back with an old ex.
So you didn't do any work.
I didn't do any work
To address the problem.
I didn't even do any work,
Is that because you didn't see it as a problem at that point?
Well, with that one there, with the overdose, it was because I literally, my brain, doctors reckon that I did do part brain damage, and I actually forgot. Like, it never came back, the fact that I was on drugs, even though it was so horrific and traumatizing, because I didn't have that memory of being on, like, being a drug user. That's what led to my relapse 2.5 years later, because I couldn't, it felt like I hadn't actually lived through it. Like, I forgot about it. It was really bizarre. So I relapsed 2.5 years later, and again, I was back out there for 2.5 years, and then this time I became a drug dealer and everything else. But I realised that I had a habit in that 2.5 years. Got the kids back again, and then lost them again because of my drug use. Because I got them back probably about 21, I reckon, and I was clean for a good period of time. But because I forgot, let one bad person in my life, and then all of a sudden I went back there, lost the kids again. It's like, haven't you learnt your lesson? Yeah. Jesus Christ! But then with that time again, when I lost my daughter and I was going to go on 18 again, followed the same pattern of suicide attempts and everything. But then I knew, like, this was because I actually had to face the fact that I had a drug problem. I knew that I had to fight, and I wasn't prepared to leave my daughter in DCP, even though, and they won the 18-year order, but I wasn't prepared to back down, because I loved her so much, and her love did overpower the drug.
So this was the thing that was different for you on this occasion?
This was different. This one was different. Because I decided to not use, and I put all my energy into doing urine screens for 2 years, 2.5 years. I had another son and everything like that. My youngest is 7, and I recognised that I had a problem, and I basically detached from a lot of people in my life. But it's saying that as much as I recognised I had a problem, I didn't realise that there was recovery work, even in this attempt.
Oh, really?
So that's why I went back.
It's about the third time or something.
This is why I went back in, because you get wiser. They say it doesn't matter how, if you keep on trying, eventually you'll get it. And that's why I'm a strong believer. If you keep on trying, you'll get it. So yes, I did realise I had a drug problem, and I fully set myself up for the come down. I bought lots of food. I didn't worry about, I didn't have big goals. I didn't set myself big goals, and I knew I wasn't going to get my daughter back tomorrow. I just had little goals, because I lost everything. I lost my kids, I lost my house, and I lost everything. And I thought, well, the first goal on my list is to get clean. That's the only one. I only set myself that one goal. It wasn't even fight for Shani yet. We weren't up to that yet. It was just get clean. So I bought lots of food. I remember I walked over the server and bought lots of food. And I set myself up in bed with some DVDs, didn't punish myself on how much I slept, and just ate. And that was what I did. I didn't care about anything else. Once I got through that, about 2 months later, I went for a house and got my own rental, which was great. So I was just making gradual, small goals, one goal at a time. Not 2, not 3, because if I did 2 or 3, it wouldn't have happened. So it was just very small goals. It was just get clean for 2 months. And I didn't put a time on it. That's just how long my body took.
Is this what you would suggest to people that are attempting to recover?
I would suggest it, but there's a lot more work to do, and I didn't do all the work. That's why I had another relapse 2 years ago. And because, yes, I did that, and I bought, it took me 6 years. I was clean for 6 years. I turned my life around. But again, this time I didn't forget that I was on drugs. I tried to avoid the fact that I was on drugs. That's what I did, So I'm getting better. You can see the gradual, the growing. But this time I knew that I was on drugs. I knew what they had done, and I knew what they cost me and how much they destroyed my life. But I tried to avoid, I did the work and I thought it was done. That's what led to my most recent relapse 2 years ago, is because I didn't, as much as I did all this goal grounding work and I realised what they cost me, I didn't realise how addiction, this is where addiction comes in. I didn't realise how addiction plays a role in your life. And even if you recognise that you're an addict or whatever, you recognise you've got a drug problem and you try to leave it, like I did. I started working in insurance and got a really good job. No one knew that I had a previous history of being on drugs. I changed my life around, and I became like a robot for 6 years, which wasn't great. That was not great. It was good that I changed my life and come up with all these new things and was doing well.
What do you mean by that? You became a robot?
I became a robot emotionally. My brain flicked a switch and I was just emotionless for 6 years.
Right.
It was weird. I just pretended like that life, didn't exist, sort of thing. So it wasn't that I've forgotten. I knew it full well was there. I just pretended like it didn't exist, thought I quit drugs, and everyone would give me a pat on the back and go, "Oh, you're so well, you did it by yourself." But you know what? They shouldn't have given me the pat on the back, because I didn't do any groundwork after that to keep me clean. And that's why I'm excited about this relapse. I mean, I'm not excited the fact that I relapsed, but I'm excited on how much I've learnt now, because I never engaged in recovery. I had another son, and I started working for insurance, a really good company. I didn't do any work on addiction. And, sure enough, I think, 6 years after being clean, a few traumas hit, and you think you're done with trauma. You haven't done any work to deal with it. And it's funny because you think you've dealt with all this, but before this new trauma hit, when my life was content, that's when all the old trauma crept back in. I could actually face it. I had to have time off work because I was crying all the time. I'm like, oh wow, this is different. I'm not like this. But it's emotion that I hadn't actually learnt to deal with. And then it was funny enough, a year after that, a lot of trauma hit. My pa died of terminal cancer. My son, I thought he was dying, my 7-year-old, with his epilepsy, when we didn't know if that was a brain tumour or epilepsy, and a few other big things hit, and all of a sudden I'm triggered, and I hadn't done any work yet. So yeah, I got clean, but I had done no work in regards to triggers. I hadn't had one for 6 years. I thought I was great to go. And then I met my partner in 2019, and because I wasn't in touch with my emotions, because I was like a robot, so I had touch with my emotions for 6 years, I realised I wanted to start to feel things again, and I had no idea how to address it. It was either go to a psychologist, which was the logical choice, or go get some gear in a hotel room and have a great sex session. And that's what we did. And you think that when you've been clean for 6 years, you can go back and do it once and you don't have an addiction anymore because you've conquered it. Well, that was my biggest failure, because, it literally, it was one time in a hotel room, and then it was straight away the next weekend, babe, can I have some more? And then he said, okay, we'll do it again this weekend. And then before you know, I'm doing it behind his back every day throughout the week. It was that quick. And I was only on it from, not last year, the year before. Sorry, it was the year before. I'm getting confused because it's been in the year, but it was the year before. So around Valentine's Day to about August 31st. That's how long it took. It was in weeks, and I had a full-blown addiction back again. And, and then from having a life where I had insurance and had house deposits and had all these things going for me, my life just went downhill that quickly. After rebuilding my life for them 6 years, I destroyed it in the matter of months, where I lost my kids again, crashed my car, that I had, house deposit gone, and then I got involved with this time. The thing that's different is I got involved with NA in the Matrix program. Bloody, both of them are brilliant. And they make you aware of how your brain is working and why, it does. But they make you aware of triggers. And I'm like, geez. And that's why I was excited about that relapse. Not about the relapse, but about recovery this time. Because I'm like, now I've got it. Now, after all these failed attempts, I've actually finally got it because I've been given the tools now to prevent a relapse. If I knew that I wasn't the only person in the world, that every person that is an addict gets triggered. Some people get triggered daily and they have daily triggers, and that's why they go to NA daily, because they need help with them triggers. Mine are very, I haven't had a trigger since I've quit, and it's been about 18 months now since I've quit. I haven't had a trigger yet, but in saying that, at least the thing that's different from this and all my other relapses, I know that I'm going to have one. Whereas before, I didn't educate myself. So when triggers hit, I went back to what I knew. Whereas now, I understand that I'm an addict, and I'm watching it come out in other places in my life, whether it's spending or smoking cigarettes. So these things shows that I've still got active addiction. But I understand now that just because I've stopped taking drugs doesn't mean I've stopped being an addict. I'm still an addict. And I've got to be aware of when things may hit. And I've had a lot of trauma hit this year, and back in my old patterns in life, trauma would have hit and I would have gone back to what I know. But this year and I'm sort of lucky throughout this trauma, I haven't had triggers, but it may be because I've made myself aware that, that it's just life. Trauma happens to everyone on this planet. And sometimes life doesn't turn out the way we want it to, but it's what we do moving forward, and at least now I know. And I'm so glad, I finally got there. It's taken me 34 years, but it's taken me 34 years to realise that addiction is a lifelong thing, and about, that triggers will hit. If you just quit drugs and pretend it didn't exist and don't educate yourself on triggers, you'll more than likely end up using again.
So what would you say to people who've just experienced drugs for the first time and recognising that perhaps an issue, haven't been through all the stuff that you've been through? What would you say to them about managing that and making some progress around the drug issue?
One, I would definitely say just don't take it, which is easier said than done. Like, I've got a 19-year-old and he was doing pills and all this. He was starting off, just starting his way into the drug world. And, I made him aware. At 19, he was 18, he's just turned 19 yesterday. But I've made him aware. Like, we sit down, I don't discipline him or come hard on him. I just make him aware on addiction and how it happens. I'll be like, you know what, your mum didn't start off being a full-blown addiction, AJ, like, this is how it happens. You've got a good job and you go out with your mates, and then before you know it, because I did see that he had a really good apprenticeship, and he slowly, he put in the hard yards, and then all of a sudden he's starting to take pills with his mates thinking it's fun on the weekend, but all of a sudden he's slipping. He lives in Tasmania, and I could just see with him talking to me, he's slipping. And when I started to educate my son, who was like me, didn't have no education on drugs, because he's lived in Tasmania, I live in Adelaide, and he hasn't been too close to my addiction, so he doesn't know too much about it. He's just like I was at his age. He doesn't know about addiction and how it works. And when I sort of spoke to him and I said, like, you do it on the weekends, and then eventually things start to slip. You'll start not going into work, or you'll start going into work late, or eventually give up your job. And you think it's just natural, but you got no idea in your head that it's actually the drugs that are causing you to make these decisions, and that's the start of the addiction. And I'm really proud of him, because he listened to me, and since we've had these in-depth conversations, I've educated him more. He's now not doing them drugs on the weekend. I didn't tell him to not do it. I said I would have liked for him to not do it, but it's his choice at the end of the day. It was just my job to educate him, and then he made up his right choice at the beginning, which is great. But with people that aren't educated like myself, and just watch these movies like that Blow movie or whatever, and you just see all drugs as bad, and you've got no idea about addiction, and you've got no knowledge, and anyone's susceptible. And the sad thing is, it's in schools now, You know, like it's not weed in schools like back in my day. It is pills and meth and all this stuff, these dangerous drugs that alter kids' minds that you know, kids have now have access to and us parents are going to worry about. But we need more education. Definitely need more education.
So can you talk a little bit about, just in conclusion, I guess, just in about your relationship with NA and
Love NA.
and what's that, and what that's meant to you, the Matrix program, that sort of stuff. And I guess it'd be interesting for people to hear how that experience has been for you, and I guess an encouragement for them to consider those sorts of treatment methods.
Yeah, well, Matrix was brilliant because it's treatment, but it's education, and I'm a pretty wise person, even though I did the wrong thing a few times. Took me a while to get before I got it. The Matrix helped me understand how my brain worked, and that was really good because I like scientific stuff, and just to see how, you know, my rational brain stopped working. I learned all about this. You know, when you're on drugs, you know, you don't think rationally. And that's what the Matrix program is about, and it helps you understand how your brain function actually works on drugs. And for many months after, like I was still buggered up this time, even though I quit, like, you know, for 6 months after, I was still making, my rational thinking had not kicked in yet. It was still making, you know, not rational, my thought process just wasn't there. So the Matrix program is really good with that, understanding triggers. And NA is really good with that. NA's like a family. Like you can, you know, there's people that come to NA from interstate or overseas. And at the beginning, you know, like it was a bit different. But the more and more I went, it's just brilliant. It's just like a big family, and everyone's got their own story. Everyone's got their own trauma background. We've all done things, you know, like a lot of people have lost their kids or stolen or, you know, we've all done it, you know, we've all done the same things, but there's no judgment there. There's no judgment. It's like like a family unit. Some weeks when I'm not mentally flowing great, when I'm in family court with my son, I'll get extra NAs, and it's not because I've got triggers, it's just because I need to get out of it. Like I've recognised that much now. That's probably why I don't get the triggers, is because now I've realised if I'm running rough mentally, that will lead to my trigger. So I'm lucky I can stop it way at the beginning. Like a lot of people wait till they get triggered and go to NA, but I stop it right at the mental thought process when I realise I'm in bed a little bit too much, or I'm having racy thoughts over night time, and I'm mentally spiralling downhill. I can stop it now right at the beginning before it even gets to the trigger, and I'll just go to NA. And just having people there who are going through the same thing, and I guarantee you'll find someone that's nearly going through some sort of same thing. You know, there's people that's had family members die of overdose. There's been murders. There's been every AIDS. You know, there has been every avenue, every walk of life. So there'll be someone there that you can probably relate to, and it's just amazing to see how many people have grown. You know, we've all lived chaos lives. We've all made the wrong decisions. We're not bad people. We've just come from a trauma background, basically. We're all there for the same thing. But just having that support, you know, is great. You know, my girls come along with me, and we go out for dinner after NA, about 30 of us, and we all have a chat, and it's an amazing journey. I love it, and I would definitely recommend it.
So can you, if you were to give people 2 pieces of advice from all of your experiences around how to deal with and manage addiction, what can you quickly think of those? What those
probably one, recognise that addiction is a lifelong thing, and recovery is a lifelong thing, because if you start lacking insight into, especially recovery is most important, because there are sayings, you know, people can get clean over a period of time, and it's the relapse that kills them. It's when they go back out there, and the shame and the guilt because they've done the same thing that nearly destroyed their life the first time, it nearly kills them. So recovery is so vital. Realise when, you know, because recovery will teach you when you're running rough, when triggers hit, but also it doesn't just teach you about all these things. There's support there when they do happen. You know what I mean? So if you're one of these people that finding it hard to give up or finding it hard to get through triggers, you know, like, you're not alone. Come to NA, and, you know, like, there will be people that will help support you through your triggers, because they've gone through the same thing. It's not like we're speaking to people that haven't gone through it. They're people that can relate, people that will help you, and it's helped so many people.
So thanks very much for spending the time with me today to talk about your experiences. That has been fabulous and it's really appreciated.
You're welcome.
I hope that there was something that you were able to gain from listening to Shanice. If you have had any triggers as a result of listening to her story, you can contact these numbers here for any further help. If you wish to contact myself, you can contact me at the email below. Thanks everybody for being with me. Take care, look after yourselves and be safe.